They call it preseason week 3, the dress rehearsal, but some big-name starters won't play a half this week. We'll tell you who you can trust in this week's DFS Friday night slate, and we'll recommend some lesser-known players who will get lots of playing time. But first, let me introduce you around the horn here. We are the Footballguys DFS Power Grid. We come at you once a week during the regular season, and I'm joined by Ryan Hester, John Lee, and Devin Knotts. We're going to go right into the analysis here. Devin, I'm going to pitch it to you first. I want to hear about the way you use Vegas lines in the preseason, if you do it all, and just give us a little bit of a preview of this Friday night slate.
Yeah, so we're covering sports betting this year at Footballguys. So with the passing of the legalization bill, so we're going to cover some games each week. Just an interesting tidbit, not on the Friday slate, but the Browns have been under every single week in Hugh Jackson's coaching history. But looking at this slate, it's really interesting because the Seahawks Vikings is at 39.5, where the Raiders are projected to score the most points at about 24-25, somewhere in there, and their starters are going to play for a good amount of that game. So I'm tending to avoid the Seahawks-Vikings game. We're potentially looking at some Raiders, as well as the Detroit-Tampa Bay game, which has an over-under at 45, and the Patriots-Panthers are at 45.5 as well. So those are the teams I'm really trying to target. It's preseason, so the over-under is always a little bit tough because could points come with the starters in, or are they going to come when the backups are in? But we're going to try and break that down here for you in the next 30 to 45 minutes.
Yeah, John, does anything jump out at you about Vegas? I mean, it feels like Vegas isn't going to sort of go out on a limb with giant totals and giant spreads in the preseason. Do you pay much attention to these things?
I can tell you that we've recorded, I don't know, how many of these shows do you think recorded at this point? Maybe.
This is our third season, so we've done, 40 shows.
Okay, let's say we've done 40 shows and this is the 41st. This is the first time in 40 shows where I have not looked at the Vegas lines as part of my preparation. I can tell you that for sure. I think honestly, it's the age-old thing, right? If you talk about people who are gambling in preseason, you tend to refer to them as degenerates, and that these are derogatory terms because we really don't always know what's going to happen from a scoring perspective. Speaking of degenerates,
bet the Browns under every single week.
Yeah.
So for those of you listening to the audio version of this, and those of you new to the show, Devin just flashed the red black-eyed Joe sign up. That means he disagrees with something that someone else said. And so that's sort of a signal for me to pitch it to him to talk about it. So Devin says always bet the Browns under. Maybe John.
Not on this slate, but we can still talk
they're
about
not on this slate. So
yeah, it's fine.
Who do they play next? So give everybody a shout out. The Browns
play the Eagles Thursday night. So tomorrow night. So if you're listening,
you'll have a few hours to get that in. But to address your question, Austin, I'm just not a big fan of really relying upon the lines. For me, it's all about playing time and ownership and game strategy. There isn't a whole lot of cash game strategy for me in preseason. I'm only interested in playing GPPs and picking those diamonds in the rough. And certainly we'll talk about a few of the guys that I have my eyes on this week as this episode progresses.
Yeah, and so Devin is generally our sort of cash game enthusiast, so he may disagree with you that there aren't cash game plays this week. But yeah, preseason
can cash games in preseason.
Oh, okay, great.
We agree.
Okay, awesome. Because usually Devin is a big fan of the cash games. Okay, great. I like hearing that advice. Ryan, let me pitch it to you. How does your strategy change a little bit in preseason? Like Devin said, don't really play cash games. All the prices of all the players are the same, so you don't even have to think about like value and salary. What's something that stands out to you that's special about preseason?
Yeah, you really have to grind on playing time and trying to read between the lines about what coaches are saying, what players are saying, what beat writers are saying, and you need to find guys that are going to be in the game. Otherwise, how do you get fantasy points? Where normally I think the majority of us on this show are kind of numbers guys. We look at research, we look at stats, we come up with ideas based on things that are actually happening. It's not as much of the hashtag narrative street. But in the preseason, I think you can bring a little bit of that in. In Tampa, Ronald Jones is really struggling. His running backs coach said that he didn't get thrown the ball to in college, probably because he can't catch or can't, be effective in that way. So
right.
They look to get a high priced pick involved this week. Not to spoil the running back section, but I mean, things like that pop up in the media are just things that kind of get my ears to perk up. Golden Tate said our offense is struggling through 2 weeks. We really need to get it going. So everybody thinks that, but the guys that are actually coming out and saying it are pretty frustrated. And so, instead of having a bland vanilla scheme, might be some incentive for that coaching staff to actually get the team going and get them some confidence, because next week games are basically throwaways. So this is the week to do it if you're going to.
Yeah, and one of the ways you can get some of that information from the beat reporters is reading our Footballguys.com training camp reports. They come out once a week, and it's like a 45-page document with all kinds of sourced information with tidbits like that. So be sure to check that out over on our website. Let's see. Before we kick over to quarterbacks, we're going to go position by position and talk about some different players and injuries, things like that. Just want to let you know that over at footballguys.com/giveaway, we're having a giant giveaway, and it ends on Monday, August 27th. So be sure you get your entries in for that. Some of the prizes we have up for grabs there: a giant championship belt, or a video call with Football Guys staffers, or Matthew Berry of ESPN and RotoPass will give you a Smack Talk video that you can play for your league mates. It'll be customized for you, like, hey, guys, in the whatever, Ultimate Fantasy Football League, Chuck is totally going to destroy you guys. Whatever. He'll do it better than me. So that's a good prize. Be sure to check that out, footballguys.com/giveaway. Okay, Ryan, I'm going to come back to you to talk about some quarterbacks. We've got 12 teams on this 6-game Friday night slate. Which of these 12 teams has a quarterback that you like to play this week?
I'm going to kind of start the opposite way and just say, don't look at Aaron Rodgers.
Right.
The Green Bay starters were playing on the scout team this week, which is a big indicator that they're not going to be involved. A lot of times the third game, the guys play the most, and we saw Rodgers and those guys have a very effective first series last week. So one might think that they'll be playing more. They won't be, very likely. So let's avoid them. On the other hand, if you want to go big name, you can just start with Tom Brady. He played an entire half last week, and an article came out today about him looking to shake off the rust and get involved with some new pass catchers, as Julian Edelman's missing 4 games. So there's a lot of talk about him making connections with Kenny Britt, even Cordero Patterson, which I'll believe when I see. But he will be on the field for at least a half. And anytime you can get that, especially with Carolina starting 2 rookie defensive backs, it might be worth a shot.
Yeah, and on the other side of the ball in that game with Carolina, Devin, you mentioned some news before we went on air about their starters. Does that give you confidence in their players? What did you hear?
Yeah, Cam Newton's going to play at least in the start of the third quarter, along with all of the Panthers starters. Who knows if it's true? But I mean, if they put together 3 touchdowns in their first 3 drives, he's not coming out in the third quarter. But if he puts together 3 touchdowns in his first 3 drives, he's well worth the price to play. So he's jumping up as one of my top guys this week. Matthew Stafford is also looking up, as Ryan mentioned. The offense has been pretty stagnant, and he's had some success in week three of the past. The one name that I guess I'll kind of avoid is Russell Wilson. So he's going to be popular because he's had 2 big week 3 games over the last 2 times he's played. But the one thing he has to go against the Vikings defense, which are one of the top defenses in the league. He's on the road, which is not in preseason. The home team typically will play longer, and it just doesn't seem like a spot where I want to be with everyone else on him this week. So he's the guy I'm fading.
Yeah, that seems like a good call. John, you want to add anything to this quarterback mix?
A name I did not hear. I like the Cam call if he does play as much as was described. Certainly check that out on Friday afternoon. But a name that I like this week is Kirk Cousins with the Vikings. There are some real questions there in Seattle. Earl Thomas obviously still holding out. Cam Chancellor not playing. And the Vikings, to Ryan's point, the Vikings, the last few weeks have kind of stumbled, especially Kirk Cousins, and they've gone on record saying, look, we need to get straight. Last week, Cousins completed 3 of 8 passes. It's time for him to put something together with a new team, and I think that this is a really good spot for him to show what he can do under this offense. He's got some talented receivers. We both know names like Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen. And this is a great spot for him.
You're pronouncing it right this year.
I know.
Hooked on a Thielen.
What did he say? Adam? Wasn't it Adam Thielen before?
No, it's
Thielen.
Thielen. Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. But yes, between those two guys and Cousins, I love that stack this week. I think it'll be relatively underowned as well. So it's the way that I'll be going on Friday night.
Nice, and we'll do some more stacks at the end of the show as well. But that's a good tease for some of our stacks this week. Let's talk about some running backs. Let's see, Ryan, I'm going to pitch it to you here for some running backs. But before I do, Ryan Hester does this weekly in-season column called Trend Spotting. It's an article where he looks at recent trends. It helps with DFS and season long. And it kind of focuses on target distribution, kind of where the opportunities are. So be sure to check that out in the season to see where sort of the game flow, which players the game flow is going through. Sometimes you'll find guys that, maybe haven't scored fantasy points yet, but they're sort of primed to score some fantasy points. Ryan, tell me about a running back you like this week.
Thanks for mentioning the column, first of all.
Yeah.
It's hard to get much further down the list than Christian McCaffrey. As Devin pointed out, the Carolina starters Ron Rivera came out and said that he wants to see them play at least a series into the third so that they can see what some halftime adjustments look like. The one thing that, is a little worrisome is that Carolina's offensive line is just crushed with injury right now. Matt Khalil is week to week, among other players. And so that is one thing that could put a damper on McCaffrey's day. It could actually put a damper on Newton's day. I think if Newton doesn't play into the third, it's more likely it's because he's running for his life than because he scored 3 touchdowns in 3 drives. But McCaffrey is getting usage like he is going to be the RB1. Whether that's experimental or not and will carry into the regular season, it doesn't really matter because if it's experimental, they're probably still going to continue to experiment with it. Another guy I like is Chris Carson in Seattle. A lot of hubbub has been made of the Chris Carson-Rashad Penny contest so far this year, but Rashad Penny has a broken finger and very likely will not be playing in this game and probably won't be playing until week 1, if that. Carson looked explosive.
20 pounds and
yes,
out of shape, and there's a bunch of other things with Penny.
Pete Carroll just dropped it into a press conference that he gained a bunch of weight, which for running backs, they always think they have to. It doesn't always work. Look at Joe Mixon last year. So anyways, I like Chris Carson. He had a touchdown negated by hold last week, but he looked very explosive, breaking tackles. So he's another guy I'm looking at.
John, you flashed up kind of the red sign, green sign when, Ryan was talking about the Carolina situation. Was that your concern about the offensive line there?
Yeah, in part it was. So the Carolina offensive line earlier this week has been, there are questions popping up with regards to who's going to start for that team. So that's one end of it. And the other end, it's just game strategy. CMC McCaffrey has looked great in the preseason, and he's getting all the hype. You read Twitter. If you're on Twitter, you probably have, he's about every third tweet. His ownership will be through the roof. And for that reason, I think he's worth a fade this week. Anybody in preseason who's more than 20% owned is probably worth a fade in preseason.
Mm.
And so with that in mind, I suspect he'll be 30 to 40% owned. And I don't disagree with anything that Ryan said, but from a game strategy perspective, led off the show saying that I don't play cash games in preseason for GPPs. For me, he's a fade, and I think the way to go is somebody else who won't be that highly owned.
I just eat the chalk this week with McCaffrey.
Yeah, you're saying go for it.
There's so many different unknown guys that it's not like regular season where they're, especially at the wide receiver position we're going to get into. Who knows at wide receiver? I mean, that's the reality, and differentiating yourself elsewhere is where I'm going to go. I think McCaffrey's a great play. I think that, if you want CJ Anderson, I think that that's a fine play too, because he's getting just as many carries as McCaffrey, and he could potentially score the touchdown. But
I would go with him.
One of those. I'm going one of those two in every lineup I built this week.
CJ Anderson is the pivot away from CMC if you want to be a GPP darling. That's how I see it.
Gotcha. Devin, I want to ask you if you've got other running backs. We haven't talked a whole lot about the New York matchup, Giants versus Jets, and we also haven't talked much about the Denver at Washington matchup. Is there any running backs in those two games that you would be interested in?
Yeah, I'm not talking about Washington because Adrian Peterson's going to get some work, but he's probably only going to get a couple carries, and that backfield is a disaster.
Yeah.
One guy I like is Wayne Gallman. So Saquon Barkley's not going to play. They're saying he's going to be okay, but who knows with these muscle injuries? I think they're going to get Gallman ready as if he's the guy for week 1. I know that there's probably only a 10 to 15% chance that he'll actually play week 1, or get significant carries week 1. But Gallman's looked good this preseason. Catches passes out of the backfield, which is something that I typically want, which is why, I'm not looking at a guy like Jonathan Stewart, because you just get, especially on DraftKings, you get that full point every single time the guy catches a pass, which if you're only getting 9 or 10 carries, a reception is worth so much more than a typical reception would be in the regular season. Royce Freeman's a guy that I'm really looking at. So I think that they're trying to ramp him up to as a rookie, him and Kerryon Johnson, I guess, from Detroit. Looking at rookie running backs who could get a significant amount of playing time, because ultimately they need game experience with the number one offense. And I think that, this is the perfect time to do it. They're going against a defense who's going to be starting their starters. And look, with running backs, we're talking, like I mentioned, the most running back's going to get 8 to 10, maybe 12 carries. It's kind of just touching a hand. The last guy I'll mention is Chris Warren. Oakland saying that their starters will play about a quarter, a little more than that. I don't see Marshawn Lynch playing much. Doug Martin may play a little bit. Chris Warren had 18 carries last week's game. He was the only running back on Oakland to have more than 1 carry. So I think that, if the trend continues, it's something to monitor.
Nice. Let's move on to wide receivers. If you want to learn more about our sort of daily fantasy content, be sure to check out our Daily Fantasy Pro subscription over at footballguys.com. That'll get you all the daily fantasy content. And if you play season long as well, you can get the season long pro package, or if you want both packages, go with the all pro package, because that will get you all of our content on our site for less than buying the 2 packages individually. That's the best deal over there.
And if you want a lifetime subscription, go to footballguys.com/giveaway.
Yes, and try to win that lifetime subscription. Good point, Devin. That is the best way to go. John, let's talk about wide receivers. Who do you have on your radar in that position?
This week, looking at my list, I think, there are a number of ways to go, as Devin's already pointed out. I think this is really where you want to differentiate. You got to get that guy who off the cuff catches 6 passes for 90 yards and a touchdown. You do that, I think you're in a great spot to win a tournament this week. The player I'm looking at is Manny Sanders against Washington. Heavily targeted last week. Demaryius Thomas likely not going to play. If you don't want to go with Manny Sanders because he did so well last week and you think the ownership will be high, don't be afraid to go with the rookie on the other side of the field, Courtland Sutton. looks like he, could be the real deal. He's playing very well. A lot of rave reviews coming out of camp. I like both of those guys. And, working backwards from what I was talking about with Kirk Cousins, if you like Manny Sanders or Sutton, you can pair him up with Case Keenum there in Denver going against the Redskins. Outside of those guys, I think you can't go wrong with Mike Evans against Detroit. He's a guy that, he's an animal. And I think that this is his time. And I think maybe Devin probably has some statistics to add on that front based on some things we were talking about.
The guy tears up the preseason. So,
right.
At home, so he's 50-plus yards in each of his 2 home games last year. He had 49 yards on the road last week. I think that this is a situation where Ryan Fitzpatrick and him get aligned because Jameis Winston's not going to be there week 1. So, John.
All right. And I'll give you a hot take just to wrap out the wide receivers that I know neither of the other guys are going to give you. There are a lot of questions in Seattle right now. There's Baldwin will not play. Lockett looks like he's not going to play. That only leaves one guy. And
I was going to say it. You're wrong. I was going to say it.
You were going to say it. Okay.
Go ahead. You finish.
I don't have an issue this week. I don't think he's a viable season-long fantasy football player. But this week, I think Brandon Marshall's in play. We're not talking about it.
That's the
Brandon
wrong guy.
Marshall. If one of my favorite defenses this week is Minnesota. I'm at the end of the show. I'll probably mention that. But if you're rostering anybody from the Seahawks this week, I don't mind Brandon Marshall because I think inside the red zone, he still has the ability to catch touchdowns. And really, that's ultimately what you need to win tournaments this week. It's scores. And I think he's the guy that they get inside there. That's who they'll be going after because they got no tight ends, no receivers, and he does have hands, and I think he can be able to pull one in.
Ryan was feisty. Ryan was feisty about this one. What do you got, Ryan? You disagree.
That's the wrong guy. It's Jerron Brown. He had 2 for 74 last week with a 45-yard long. And he actually is a nice season-long sleeper for those of you that might, for some reason, take this in after Friday. Brandon Marshall, yeah, sure, he'll get on the field in the second half, but Jerron Brown will probably be the most.
He'll be on the field in the first half.
Jerron Brown will be the most heavily targeted guy from Russell Wilson, so that's what I'm more interested in.
All right, we got a disagreement. I like this. We'll see how it plays out.
Right logic, wrong player.
So
CJ Prosise will be the most heavily targeted guy, but
Devin might be right.
That could be right. Yeah. So last year we had some friendly wagers, let's say, where sometimes people ended up painting their faces like a black-eyed Joe, John.
Do I not get to talk about wide receivers?
No, you are. Or shaving. Okay. I don't want to leave this moment, though, first. Or maybe shaving their head over a tight end bet. We don't want to set anything up in the preseason about Seattle wide receivers here, do we?
No, I think we're good.
Okay, just making sure. And Devin, as I pitch it to you for receivers, there have been times in the past where there's been some hesitance about playing receivers against Detroit because of Darius Slay. Is that in play at all here for this game?
No.
And I figured that was the case. I just want to make sure.
No, I mean, the only defense I'm really afraid of is Minnesota's. And just because they are so stacked top to bottom, look, it's the preseason. They're going to do some things where Darius Slay may go to the slot for a couple plays. Like, right. Honestly, Darius Slay is not shadowing anybody in the preseason.
That's what I figured, but I wanted to get your take on it.
Yeah, I don't think so, unless someone disagrees with me. But looking at wide receivers, so there's a couple guys who I like. Chris Hogan's the first guy I mean, he should be the most popular guy on any position. Looking at his last 2016 preseason, he went 5 for 62 with the touchdown. 2017, week three of the postseason, 4 for 70 and 2 touchdowns. The team needs to prepare without Julian Edelman because he's out for 4 games. As we mentioned, Brady is going to have to prepare as if they don't have him. I think Hogan gets a lot of work and a lot of targets in this game. The other two receivers, and I'm fine with stacking them both, Marvin Jones and Golden Tate. Typically, in the regular season, you'd never consider doing it. But last year, they went 4 for 62 and a touchdown and 5 for 62, with Golden Tate having the 562 and Marvin Jones scoring the touchdown. So, look, I mean, if you want to go with the super stack for Detroit and go Stafford, Jones, Tate, it's not the worst idea in the world, and we'll get into stacks in a little bit. The last sleeper that I like is Laquan Treadwell for Minnesota. It's really time to put up or shut up for the former first-round player. He's really struggled. There's talks that coaching staff thinks that week 3 or year 3 for him could be a good one, but I think that they need to try to get him involved. Josh Doxson a little bit in the same boat where, look, it's time to actually start performing if you're one of these guys, and if you don't do it in week 3 of the preseason, are you really going to do it in the regular season? So looking a little bit at Treadwell as a dark play.
I like it. Those are some good picks. One thing I think to keep in mind with that Detroit setup is in the last preseason game, they played a lot of 2 wide receiver sets where Golden Tate wasn't in there. But generally, they play a lot of 3 receiver sets. So they could completely switch it up in this preseason game, go back to 3 and get Golden Tate in there. But for some reason, he wasn't running in the 2 receiver sets in preseason week 2.
I think 3 is going to be their base all year, so it seems logical that you'd see more of it this week.
Yeah, and I think that's the right take.
I'm actually surprised, though, Devin, that you did not mention Kenny Golladay. Is that a game strategy perspective, or do you just not like what Golladay has done?
I just don't like the player. I mean, I know I'm in the minority there, but he's a long throw type guy that, I mean, people love him because of what he did in week 1 of last year, scoring 2 touchdowns. But he's not a guy that, I mean, I said it at the beginning of last year, he's not a guy that I trust because he's never really had that elite touchdown, deep threat type, dating back to college. So it's probably a bias that I have, honestly. But he's just not a guy that I typically target. He had 3 touchdowns last year. Everyone fell in love with him because of that first week, and he didn't do a whole lot after that.
I mean, I think he has 2 touchdowns already this preseason, does he not? I could be wrong on that front, but I believe he has 2 touchdowns. I'm looking it up on the fly here, but of course I can't find it. But if he has a couple touchdowns already, and if I'm right, the guy's got the biggest stature of those wide receivers. He's 6'4", second-year wide receiver, which we know historically is when wide receivers tend to come into their own. I don't hate the play. My fear is that after scoring a couple touchdowns in the preseason, that he'll be so heavily owned that it kind of takes away from the attraction.
And it's very rare that we see guys go off in consecutive or really 3 straight preseason games. Typically, they'll want to get the other guys involved. So that's why, like I said, I don't love Golladay, so I have a bias against him. I'll fully admit that, just because of being a college type expert of his touchdowns aren't sustainable. He's not a 10 touchdown guy, but I can see the play. I can see the logic behind it.
Yeah, so Devin Knotts is our sort of one of our college football experts on staff. We have a lot of guys who look at college tape, but Devin brings that to our DFS team. So a lot of times he may have a bias based on their college experience, but he generally brings some good knowledge that has to do with what he's seen in college games as well.
And look, he did score touchdowns, and someone's going to chirp me that he didn't score. He did score touchdowns, but he didn't score them in this long, deep throw fashion. So his longest catch in 2016 at Northern Illinois was 49 yards. So while good, it's not like he was this elite deep threat. His average catch per target or per reception was 13 yards. So he's not this 25, 30 yard deep throw. He's not Josh Gordon, which some people are comparing him to, which is ridiculous.
Marvin Jones is the best deep ball receiver on that team.
But inside the red zone, who's the best receiver? And this doesn't need to be a Kenny Golladay blow up fest. But I mean, Marvin Jones, Golden Tate, Kenny Golladay. They've got Luke Wilson at the tight end position this year. you got to have somebody with some size and stature, and I think that's the guy, and I think he evolves into that role this year.
Marvin Jones.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the Marvin Jones bandwagon with Ryan there. All right, let's move on. We're going to go to tight ends. John, I want to pitch this to you first for tight ends. John Lee, we are not related with that we know of. And he's our resident scientist. And generally he'll talk about cornerback. He's a super nerd. And he generally talks about cornerback matchups. And while he plays both cash games and GPPs, steers more towards sort of the game theory side of things and the GPP side of things. And he's been to multiple live finals, including way back in the day, some Draft Street live finals, which is a nice way of saying he's very old. John, tell me about tight ends.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot I like at tight end. I'm actually anxious to hear what the other guys have to say this week about tight ends. I think you can put Jimmy Graham into the mix this week against Oakland. And outside of that, there's not a whole lot that I like, but a name that I admittedly did not know before I started researching for the show. Somebody that I probably will have more of than the rest of the world is Jordan Leggett for the New York Giants. Going up against for the Jets, going up against the New York Giants. He should get a little bit of Alec Ogletree, who I know that Devin loved coverage. Week 1, he was beaten by David Njoku for a pair of touchdowns, and last week, the running back for the Lions, name starts with a T. And
Riddick.
Riddick beat him for a 40-yard touchdown last week. And this week, Jordan Leggett, it's his turn. And he came back from a minor injury, and he's the tight end there in Jets land this week. I think that he's under-owned and has touchdown upside. So I'll be having a little bit of him as well in addition to Jimmy Graham.
Yeah, we do we do a preseason show to work out the cobwebs here a little bit, football guys, and also, we do it special for you most diehard of DFS players. Ryan, you flashed up a sign related to tight ends. What are you thinking?
Yeah, just beware on Jimmy Graham in case he doesn't play, like I alluded to earlier with the Packers starters. But if he does, yeah, obviously nothing wrong with that. Just a matter of how, if and how much he plays. Similar to John, I had written down a Jets tight end, but I had written down Clive Walford. So it might be one of these things where it's one or both. But again, just a little homework, a little nugget to stash away for everybody who's going to keep watching in the regular season is start your tight ends and or pass catching running backs against the Giants. Last year, I think, as we know, I think it was week 12 before the Giants didn't allow a receiving touchdown to a tight end in a game. And then they proceeded to allow them, I think, in like 4 of the last 5. So overall, it was like 15 receiving touchdowns by tight ends, something in that neighborhood. And as Devin pointed out.
And they added Alec Ogletree, who's the worst defensive linebacker.
So it's 15, and they added a guy who's worse at covering people. So just that's going to be in the trend spotting column throughout the year, and we'll talk about it here on the show, I'm sure, ad nauseum until it doesn't work. So Clive Walford's another name to keep in mind.
Nice. So I'm noticing on the show sheet a note that may be left over from every week last year, but it says that Jordan Reed is injured. So don't play Jordan Reed. Devin, who would you play at tight end?
I mean, I think, they've mentioned some good ones. The one guy I'm interested in is Evan Ingram, just because I think Eli Manning, who knows with Odell Beckham. He's never really been a preseason type guy. So if Manning is going to play, keep an eye on the news, obviously. We're recording this on Wednesday night. But if Eli Manning is going to play, that immediately makes Evan Ingram, or play a significant portion, that immediately makes Ingram the top receiver in my mind, because I don't think Beckham cares about the preseason. He just hasn't been that involved historically. So Ingram is the guy that I think will probably go a little underlooked, but in my opinion, he's the most talented talented tight end outside of Gronkowski, but Gronkowski's not going to really do much this week either. So Jimmy Graham, I just don't think he's going to play that much, and it makes me really sad when I think that Alec Ogletree's making $10 million a year for 4 years. So those are my thoughts on tight ends.
Nice. Let's talk about defenses and Oh, wait a minute. Not kickers, just defenses. Who's got a defense that they like in the preseason?
Start with Matt Bryant.
right. Always start Matt Bryant. Oh man.
Oh man.
We got no automatics here. We don't know what to do with ourselves. Ryan, hit me with the defense that is your sort of flyer this week.
Yeah, I'll save John's for him that he teased earlier, but it's a flyer. So Aaron Rodgers isn't playing. Oakland's at home. John Gruden might want to win a game before they get started. So Oakland facing the Brett Hundley, DeShone Kizer combo.
Nice. That's not exactly a fearsome combo there.
That's right.
John, who did you tease earlier? Hit us.
I teased the Minnesota Vikings against Seattle.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, I mean they're a mess right now. They have Russ Wilson. Oh Lord, you can tell I'm in preseason form, fellas.
We're working it out, guys. We're working it out. Just name the team and the position, and maybe like a letter or do like some charades or something. We'll get you.
Trying to think of the head coach's name, Pete Carroll.
Pete Carroll. Oh yeah, gum chewing Pete Carroll.
He's not new.
How do you
No, he's not new. But if Pete Carroll has
the oldest coach,
he'll get Russell Wilson out of that game early because they have some issues on the offensive line. They have 0 receivers. It makes a lot of sense just to get him the heck out of the game and put the backups in there at some point. I mean, we'll see exactly what he does do. And the backups are they answer to the name of Austin Davis, and are we afraid of him? And then Alex McGough. We don't even know how to pronounce his last name. There's nothing there to be afraid of. They have receivers. We talked about Baldwin won't play. Lockett looks unlikely. Rashad Penny's not playing. It's just not a good spot. And then, oh, by the way, the Vikings are pretty darn good on defense. And then they added a safety today or yesterday. Today, George Aloka. He may not play, but this could not be any worse for the Seahawks. So if I was playing a lot, and I think I'll probably play a few high-dollar contests this week, but if I were playing a bunch, I would have over 50% Minnesota Vikings this week in GPPs.
How dare you besmirch the name of Austin Davis, a fellow Austin? How could you do this, John?
Well,
at least I can.
Not Lee. So if it did that, then that would be bad.
All right. Well, at least we can pronounce Austin Davis. Devin, give us a defense you like this week.
Yeah. I'm going to go with the Giants. And it's going to be off the board because the media is hyping Sam Darnold out of control. And, a lot of talk is coming in that, he's going to win the job and, he's the best rookie quarterback that's coming out of the draft, and a lot of it's the New York media. They want the Jets to be good, but the reality is he threw a really bad interception his last start, and he's still a rookie. And I think the Giants are going to win this game pretty handily. So the Giants are a defense I'm looking at, and then realistically, what I'll say is if you want to differentiate yourself, the defensive position is a great one because the second half, you're going to have a lot of scrubs that come in, and really it's a message for all the preseason, especially next week where week 4, it's basically put a defense in a hat and just pick one out because, there's going to be a chalk defense like there is every week, whoever's touting some defense. But the reality is that, you're going to get the Vikings starters for a quarter and a half, maybe a half. They could give up 21 points in the second half, no problem. So it's not to say the Vikings are a bad play by any means. They're probably the best play on the slate. But the reality is any defense is in play. So I would typically take a home defense. And I know the Giants aren't technically at home, but it's their home stadium. They'll have more fans than the Jets probably.
True.
But I would look at home defenses because the starters typically play longer, and any of them are in play. You could take the Panthers and just hope Tom Brady has one good drive and they pull him. Like, there's a number of different ways that you could actually go.
Yeah, and you make a good point about week 4 of preseason being super wacky, so wacky that we will not be doing a power grid in week 4 preseason. But I guarantee you we'll be back for the regular season, so don't miss us too much next week.
Early week 1.
Yeah, we're going to do an early week 1 show. We'll try to drop that one on Tuesday morning, the week of week 1, to get you started in advance. All right, guys, we're moving on to stacks. John, you've already mentioned a couple of stacks. Let me pitch it to the other guys, see if they've got a stack they want to mention. Devin, I'm going to pitch it right back to you because you were on a roll before. What's a stack you like?
I mentioned the Lions super stack that I like with Marvin Jones and Golden Tate, so I'm not going to go there. Let's go with
he's got this.
I'll go Eli Manning and Evan Ingram. I think that they want to get Evan Ingram in the end zone. And Eli Manning wants some good vibes. He's not playing next week, let's be honest. So I think he wants some good vibes heading into the year after an atrocious year last year.
I like it. Ryan, I bought you some time to come up with a stack over there. What do you got?
Thanks for that, too. If Mike Evans is such a good play, Ryan Fitzpatrick's going to play into the third quarter. So Fitzpatrick Evans.
The Fitz magic. I like it. John, do you have any others you wanted to add, or are you good with the other ones that you mentioned before?
I think I'm pretty good with what I mentioned earlier. Those are my strongest play. But if you really want something, and it turns out to be true that Cam Newton plays into the third quarter, pair him up with Curtis Samuel.
Right on. All right, guys.
Can I throw one more in there?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
John mentioned fading McCaffrey. And the one way to get different is go Cam Newton and Christian McCaffrey, and hope he catches 6 or 7 passes, because not everyone's going to stack a running back and a quarterback. Typically, it's not really something that's done, but a lot of McCaffrey's value can come from the air because he is such a good receiver. So that's one way that you could potentially go if you're looking to start McCaffrey, if you're set on starting McCaffrey and you want to be a little different.
Probably more of a DraftKings play with the full point PPR, I would guess.
Correct.
Right on. All right, guys, this is where we move on to parting thoughts. Any last nuggets of wisdom that you might have, especially related to, preseason week 3 and it being a little bit of a special scenario? John, what are your parting thoughts for our listeners?
Don't blow your bankroll in preseason.
I was gonna say.
strong advice.
This week I probably will play about 5% or less of what my typical week is in terms of volume, and then Austin apparently did not want me to talk about running backs, and I'll give you. My number 1 and number 3 were already talked about by Devin, if I recall correctly. But my number 2 is Latavius Murray against Seattle. I think the Vikings take it easy with Dalvin Cook after what happened last year. Latavius Murray's been struggling a bit. I think they feed him with quite a bit, and he's a guy that I think will be under-owned, red zone guy. I like his possibilities this weekend. So that's where I'll end it.
I like that pick. I was just saving the best for last, John.
Yeah,
that's all it was. Ryan, what are your parting thoughts?
Yeah, again, don't go nuts. I mean, if you're planning on hanging out with some buddies and or just sitting at home on a Friday night because the kid needs to go to sleep or something, and you want to watch games, play a little bit. But yeah, don't go crazy. Nobody knows what's going to happen in any given week, let alone this one. So, but more than that, I am just super excited that football's here and that we have the regular season coming up. Nice of us to work out the preseason kinks. We're going to ship some media guides for every team to John with phonetical pronunciations of every name. And he's got a couple weeks, right? So we got a couple weeks to get fired up. And I wish that week 1 was next week, but we do need to give John that time. So it's not, but but I'm glad everybody is here with us, and we look forward to having a great audience all season long and winning some people some contests this year.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, everyone. Devin, wind us down here with the parting thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to get a little – this will be the only time I'm sentimental for the entire show. I'd just like to thank Jeff Pasquino for being on the show for a couple of years. He's not able – a couple of you guys may not notice he's not able to make it this year just due to timing and life and things happen. So, thank you, Jeff. We'll miss you. We'll miss the kicker talk and the jokes at your expense. But hopefully you'll be back maybe this season for a pop in appearance. Who knows? So thank you. No life gets in the way and your busy schedule, but just wanted to give you a shout out because he will not be with us this year.
Yeah. He will be missed. Well put, Devin. Thanks for that. All right, guys. So be sure to check out footballguys.com/giveaway to enter that contest. And then for our latest DFS content, visit footballguys.com/DFS. And be sure to check out all of our subscriptions over there. We've got the Daily Fantasy Pro package is probably what you're looking for if you're listening to this show. Like I said before, we'll be back for week 1 of the regular season. That should drop Tuesday morning, September 4th. And that's all we got for the show. It's good to be back. It's good to have football. I'm Austin Lee. On behalf of John Lee, Devin Knotts, and Ryan Hester, thank you for watching, and thanks for being a football guy. To check out our content at footballguys.com, click the button on Devin's face. To subscribe to our YouTube channel, be sure to click on the button on John's face. And if you'd like to see our latest video, click on the giant video in front of Ryan's face. Click any of those now. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening.